All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From WISH-TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist in for Phil Sanchez. Democratic governor candidate Jennifer McCormick has barely 2 weeks to convince party delegates to endorse her preferred running mate, Terry Goodin. Goodin will have to overcome votes from his legislative days against same-sex marriage and access to abortion services. I sat down with both candidates to talk about their push to recruit delegates and Goodin's vision for the office. And joining us now are Democratic nominee for governor, Dr. Jennifer McCormick, and her preferred running mate, former state representative Terry Goodin. Welcome to you both.
Hey.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, Dr. McCormick, let's begin with you. You spent a couple of months vetting potential candidates for lieutenant governor. What was it about Representative Goodin's resume that put him over the top?
Well, for me, it's about character, it's about a commitment to Hoosiers, and it's also about credentials. And so looking at the responsibilities of that lieutenant governor and considering all the years of experience that Representative Goodin had at the State House, for me, it was an easy choice, and he is a perfect fit to be the next lieutenant governor for the great state of Indiana.
And on that note, Representative, what led you to accept the request?
Well, I my last 2 years, I've been an advocate for rural Indiana with the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. And I'm not a career politician, so as I traveled around the state, I was really disturbed by what I've been seeing in our small communities, our small towns. And for some reason, it seems that they've been left behind in a lot of places. And that really disturbed me. And I think I can make a big difference with my experience at the State House and my experience with the USDA and other life experiences. I think we can move Indiana forward and go in the right direction.
How do you view the office of the lieutenant governor?
I view the office of lieutenant governor as being the support system for the governor's office, and we have the same platform, the same ideas. We follow a path and a direction, and with good leadership like we would have with Jennifer in the governor's office, we could have a great program, and I'm willing to be the team member of that, the captain of that team.
So, Dr. McCormick, as of this recording, we're about 2.5 weeks away from the state Democratic Party convention. How do you shore up enough delegates to ensure that Representative Goodin gets the nomination?
Yeah, we feel confident in that, and we welcome. I mean, it's a process, it's democracy, and so we understand that others can throw their name in, and we've had a lot of conversations. So hitting the phones, talking to a lot of people, being really good listeners, which Representative Goodin has been. And so, you know, we know what we're up against. And so we're just going to continue to work hard and do our part, make sure that the delegates feel comfortable to make the right choice.
Representative Goodin, you voted in favor of a resolution against same-sex marriage and in favor of abortion restrictions during your time in the State House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. Now, you apologized for those votes at the initial news conference with Dr. McCormick. Are you concerned, though, that more progressive members of your party might not accept that apology?
Well, I think if you're a lifelong learner, I think you will accept that, and you'll understand that as people grow older, we get a few more gray hairs, that sometimes we look back and say, hey, we probably didn't make the right decision there, or I didn't make the right decision here or there, whatever. So I think most people understand that. As we move through the whole process, I feel very confident in folks doing that, because I've had a lot of outreach from myself reaching out to folks, and also folks reaching out to me, and they understand that I'm sincere. They know that when Terry Goodin says that's what it is, then that's what it is.
The Lieutenant Governor chairs the Board of Directors for the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, and that agency's purview includes rental assistance and some other forms of homeowner assistance. How would you approach the role of Lieutenant Governor as it pertains to Indiana's housing crisis?
Well, you know, you just said it. There is a housing crisis in the state of Indiana. I think the state of Indiana needs to take a direct approach and try to figure out how to fix that. And as I traveled through a lot of those rural areas and even the suburban areas and into the urban areas. We said there's a housing crisis. It's just not in rural Indiana. It's all over the state. It's in every category of our communities. And what we need to do is we need to figure out the most efficient, effective way to create good homes for people to live in. And those working class homes is a big focus. There's the real deficit of homes for those folks who are working class Hoosiers. And we've got to figure out how to fix it. Hey, if you got a problem on the farm, you fix it. You don't continue to let it go on and on. So we've got an idea and a plan to be able to do that. And as we move forward, we've got it figured out, and we can get it done.
Tell me about how you would approach the office's Secretary of Agriculture duties.
Absolutely. So growing up on a farm, raising beef cattle now on the farm, I think the most important thing that farmers will tell you is they just want someone to listen to them and let them explain what their hardships are and what kind of concerns they have. And I've got 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, is what my grandfather told me. So as we move forward, I'll make sure that I listen very closely and attentively to those farmers, because farming is unique. And what a lot of people don't understand is a situation or a problem on one farm is not necessarily the same situation or problem on another farm. So that's why farmers really want someone that will just listen to them and try to help them figure out opportunities to help them be successful. And you know what? Hoosier farmers don't just feed the local community, that we feed the world. So it's very important, and that's a very important topic for the Lieutenant Governor's office.
How would you approach the role of Lieutenant Governor as President of the Senate if Republicans maintain control of that chamber? You would only have a tie-breaking vote.
Right. Well, as we move forward, my 20 years of experience in the House of Representatives will give the experience I need to be able to walk out into the Senate on day one and conduct business. I spent half of my tenure in the State House in the majority, where the Democrats controlled legislation, and I spent half of my career in the minority. And I understand how the minority-majority system works in government and in the legislative council side. So I will work very attentively, and more importantly, I'll be working for all Hoosiers as we work through the process. So that is going to be one of the strong points on my resume for Lieutenant Governors. Hey, I've got the experience to be able to walk in there for the first day, and we can take off and get things moving in a positive direction.
Would you continue Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch's work on mental health advocacy?
You know, I absolutely would, and I would probably go ahead and pump it up even more. I think we've got a real issue in all of Indiana, and there's a lot of communities where they're trying to figure out and struggling with addiction and a lot of other issues that come along with that. So that has got to be a top priority in the state of Indiana, not just for the governor's office. That's got to be the Lieutenant Governor's office. That's got to be the Secretary of Education's office. Everyone really needs to focus on the mental health issues in our state, because they affect everyone.
Dr. McCormick, you were a Republican until 2021. Representative Goodin is, as we've discussed, a much more conservative Democrat. Are you concerned that you're trying so hard to peel off moderate and disaffected conservative voters that you might end up alienating the Democratic Party's progressive wing?
You know, we're going to work really hard for all votes with all Hoosiers, and we know our priorities of restoring reproductive rights and freedoms and prioritizing education, going after good paying jobs and infrastructure. It's hard for any Hoosier to say those are really bad ideas. You know, we need access to affordable care. And so we are appealing to very progressive people and also conservative people. And at a time where things are so divisive, we know how important that is, that we bring back some common sense, civility, and bipartisanship. And that spirit means making sure we're being a good listener, but also looking for those commonalities of where we can move forward. Too often, you know, we see the divisiveness on either side. And a lot of Hoosiers are saying we need to get some things done. And what does that mean? That means being a good listener, being a good partner, finding those areas we can compromise in order to move forward. The alternative of the Beckwith-Braun team and that ticket is too divisive. It's too extreme, and Hoosiers don't want any part of that. So we're giving them a really good option, regardless of whether you're progressive or conservative and everybody in between. We're offering the option that makes sense for Hoosiers.
Are you concerned, though, that when voters go into the voting booth, they're just going to see the R or the D next to the candidates' names and then vote accordingly?
I mean, obviously that we're in Indiana, so I know what that means, but we're going to try really hard to make sure we get our message out. We're going to travel the entire state of Indiana. We're not just going to hit a few counties and hope for the best. We're hitting 92. We're doing a lot of listening. Our messaging is where it needs to be on issues that are supported by the majority of Hoosiers. So obviously we've got work to do to get out the vote when you're ranked 50 out of 50th in the nation in voter turnout. We understand what that means, but that also means, too, there's a lot of work, not just for us, but for every Hoosier who wants to ensure that we do not turn our state over to extremism.
Dr. Jennifer McCormick is the winner of the Democratic primary for governor. Her preferred running mate is former state representative Terry Goodin. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Coming up, the first debate ever between a sitting president and his predecessor. How President Biden and former President Trump fared in a closely watched contest. Welcome back. For the first time, two candidates for president debated before formally accepting their party's nomination. And it's also the first time a current and former president debated. It comes fewer than 5 months ahead of Election Day. Jen Sullivan recaps the highlights from the debate.
In an historic debate, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump going head-to-head in the first presidential debate of the 2024 election cycle, hosted by CNN in Atlanta Thursday. The candidates taking the stage without shaking hands. For 90 minutes, the two leaders squaring off, laying out their plans on key issues like the economy and job creation.
We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, but there's more to be done.
I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. Much less
Both
tax.
candidates agreeing to certain rules, like appearing at a uniform podium and muted mics so only one candidate could be heard at a time. At some points, intense exchanges.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
Voters got a sense of where the candidates stand on important issues like immigration.
He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like, and we have to get a lot of these people out, and we have to get them out fast because they're going to destroy our country.
When he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go.
And their vision for abortion access.
Right now, the states control it. That's the vote of the people.
The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule.
If re-elected, President Biden would end his presidency at 86 and Trump would be 82. Age has been a central issue for voters.
This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent.
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them.
I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team on the first presidential debate of the year, and some potentially worrying poll numbers for Mike Braun. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Kip Tu and Republican Tom John. Let's begin with the CNN debate, simulcast live here on WISH TV. Tom, several analysts going into this said this would be more about performance than talking points. Will what we saw on Thursday night change anyone's minds?
Well, I think it confirmed people's minds that President Biden is failing. And I think there are a lot of, all you got to do is look around the news and the internet, even NPR calls him into question, that the fact is he had a very poor performance. President Trump stayed on message and stayed pretty clear. And I think the net result is when we see polling coming out of this, that President Biden is going to take some real hits. And I think the Democrats are going to be thinking about, do they have another option come convention time?
Kip, I want you to briefly address that another option issue, but also a number of Democrats, including yourself, have said President Biden didn't do well in that debate. Now, we're still 4 months out from the election. Does that give Biden time to recover, and how does he do that?
Well, obviously, it remains to be seen. I did say the night of the debate that he didn't do well. I think that even he has admitted it. So I'm not saying not breaking new ground with respect to that. He did have, I think, a couple of really good lines in the debate. And you guys just ran it. He said that Trump's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. He's got the morals of an alley cat. I think both of those lines were well delivered, but some of it got lost in some of the answers that he gave. He had a really bad night. He's going to have to recover. He's going to have to do something to change the conversation about his age, because he did fall into the trap that was set for him, that he looked too old. And I think perhaps he was over-prepared, and perhaps he was tired from several weeks in Europe and doing some other things. I still think he's one of the best presidents we've ever had. I think he has done a fantastic job. And the day after the debate, he had his biggest fundraising day of the year, of the campaign, and he had a great rally in Carolina. So can he recover? I think it's possible.
Now, Kip, performance aside, what sort of policy insights can we gather from Thursday's debate?
Well, there's big contrast, obviously. I mean, former President Trump talked about how abortion ought to be left state by state. He's waffling back and forth on how many restrictions he wants, because he's looking at polls and knows that most of this country's pro-choice, including the state of Indiana, which I think we're going to talk about here in a minute. And so Republicans are on the defensive when it comes to abortion, as they should be. They took away women's rights a couple of years ago, and women are not happy about it. So that's definitely a policy decision that's going to animate the rest of this campaign.
Tom, the next debate is in 4 months. How do you think what we saw on Thursday will influence what we see at that debate, both from the candidates and from the moderators?
Well, I think, honestly, it will be the last debate we see, because I think President Biden's going to be afraid to come back out and debate after that performance. And I think we've seen, unfortunately, his debate performance, I have a feeling, is like garbage. It's not going to age well. And so we're going to end up with him probably trying to hide and just honestly run a campaign that I'm not Trump. If you end up with a debate, I think you'll try and have one where there's more people around so he can focus, so he doesn't get lost in thought. Several times you could see him searching and kind of getting lost and getting distracted. And in something where the visual matters, he did a very poor job of being conscious of his visual. And I think that was partially because of the empty room.
Now, speaking of elections, a new poll of nearly 1,300 Indiana voters found a nearly 30-point net unfavorability rating for Mike Braun. Jennifer McCormick had a 6-point net favorable rating. Now, we should point out this poll was conducted by a group that supports candidates who favor greater access to abortion services, though respondents were split nearly equally among Republicans and Democrats. Tom, this was a fairly large sample for a state-level poll. How worried should Braun be about those numbers?
Not at all. I mean, gubernatorial nominee Braun had millions of dollars spent telling people how bad he was over the primary. Now
and they were right.
Together, and they're going to be discussing his contrast to what a McCormick administration would be. Contrasting that to McCormick, nobody knows who she is. And the interesting thing about this is you look at this poll, it's evenly split Democrat and Republican. But if you look at every other poll, people who self-identify, it's more like 50% Republican to 30% Democrat. That means this poll is essentially goosed her Democrats, and she still doesn't have much good to look for.
Kip, to that point, nearly half of the respondents in that poll said they had not heard of Jennifer McCormick. Is that a problem at this stage in the election?
It's surmountable. I will say that. I wouldn't call it a problem. It's surmountable, but it takes money. And I just want to disagree with my good friend Tom John on that poll. It was a well done poll. It was it fit all the bills that polls are supposed to fit to be legitimate polls. It wasn't a rough split. There was a pretty big chunk between Republicans and Democrats and then independents. And I think Tom needs to look at what the independents think of Mike Braun, because they don't like him. A 29-point net negative. I agree with Tom that a lot of that had to do with TV ads that were up, but Republicans don't like Mike Braun. He won with a minority of the vote. There's a lot of Republicans out there who don't like him, and people know him now. He's very well known in the state of Indiana, and he's unpopular. That's not a good place to be. The McCormick campaign needs to be very serious and focused about raising money, because the only way she's going to get known is if they pay for political advertising on stations like yours and everywhere else. And so I hope that they get serious about it, because I think they have a real opportunity here. When people get to know Jennifer,
I've got about 20
like her.
seconds left here. Tom, I want to give you a chance to briefly respond here.
Yeah, Mike Braun raised more than $1 million on Monday. I doubt McCormick raises that in a campaign. And when Mike tells his story and his vision for the state, it's going to be a pretty clear contrast. I think it's not going to be close in November.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your insight. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to tune in at 11 for The Hill Sunday with Chris Steyerwalt. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From WISH-TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on WISH-TV and at WISH-TV.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.